Welcome to another edition of the J Report. On this episode, we meet some remarkable women who are fighting, and I mean fighting, for change. We begin with Rochelle Shoritz. Now, as you know, the Nazi regime tried to convince the world that Jews made up a distinct race. Now, while science tells us that Jews cannot be classified as a separate race, science has most recently taught us that due to exceedingly high rates of intramarriage among Jews for centuries, the Jewish people do make up a unique genetic cluster. And this genetic clustering has resulted in the passing of certain genetic mutations from generation to generation, some of which create an increased risk of contracting certain diseases. Rochelle Shoritz from Sharsheret joins us to discuss the Jewish genetic connection to breast and ovarian cancer. Now, the iconic Jewish-American actress and cancer survivor Fran Drescher has made it her mission to combat cancer with her aptly named organization, Cancer Schmancer. But now Drescher has taken her passion to support another cause, marriage equality. We talked to Fran about her efforts. And speaking of marriage, we take a look at the institution of marriage from the perspective of the Orthodox Jewish community. Now, you may be surprised to learn what a comprehensive study found out about Orthodox Jewish unions. And finally, we take a look back to the 18th Maccabean Games, where I had the honor to interview Ruth Dayan, the longtime wife of Israeli military leader and politician Moshe Dayan. You will want to hear about Ruth's commitment to social justice. But first, the J Report's Shea Yuval speaks with the executive director of Sharsheret about the BRCA gene mutation.
Here with me in the JLTV studio, I have Rochelle Shoritz, an expert and founder and executive director of the Sharsheret organization, an organization devoted to the awareness, outreach, and support of Jewish families suffering from cancer. But before we find out more about our organization, let's find out more about this specific type of cancer. Rochelle?
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for coming and joining us today.
My pleasure.
Tell us about this cancer.
Well, 1 in 40 Jews of Ashkenazi descent carries a gene mutation called the BRCA gene mutation that can increase the likelihood that someone will develop breast cancer.
Now, what is that increase? What percentage is that?
In breast cancer, it's 80%. So someone who carries a mutation in the BRCA gene would have an 80% lifetime risk of developing breast cancer.
So just so I understand, if you have a room of 40 women who are Ashkenazi, the likelihood that one of them is carrying this gene mutation?
Well, I'd even expand it. You have a room of men and women. 1 in 40 of people in the room might carry that gene. So it's not an issue limited to women. It's actually one that affects men and women in the Jewish community.
So I do understand that men can get breast cancer. So I'm assuming men are just as equally susceptible to getting breast cancer from this BRCA gene mutation.
Yeah, that's true. The gene does pass down through men and women, but the likelihood of breast cancer in men is actually much less than that in women. So I think it's fewer than 1% of men develop breast cancer in their lifetime. Obviously, the percentage is much greater among women.
But they can still pass it down to daughters and so on and so forth as a gene.
Correct. And that's why raising awareness about BRCA gene mutations in Jewish families is so important. You know, the BRCA mutation issue is not a Jewish woman issue, it's actually a Jewish family issue.
Exactly, because not only is the individual who has it affected, so is the entire family.
Correct. The decisions that one needs to make if they are a carrier, the implications for one's children, whether they're boy children or girl children, they're all affected by carrying that mutation.
Now, is breast the only type of cancer that one can get as a result of this gene mutation?
No, we've actually identified a few cancers that are associated with the BRCA gene mutation. It increases the likelihood of developing breast cancer, but also ovarian cancer and some related cancers in men, such as prostate cancer.
Now I understand that through mammograms you can sort of detect when you have a lump or whatnot, but how does one detect when you have ovarian cancer? What are the symptoms? What do you do to protect yourself or be proactive?
Well, one of the complications in ovarian cancer is exactly that. Symptom detection is so much more complicated because we don't have an effective screening tool for ovarian cancer in the way we do for breast cancer. And many of the symptoms actually manifest themselves as things you would just associate with a virus or a stomach ache. It could be bloated stomach or irregular bleeding. And so knowing whether or not you're a carrier of the gene mutation will actually help in the sense that you're screened more proactively, you've got a medical team in place, and someone is watching to see if those symptoms are actually associated with cancer rather than just some other unrelated illness.
Okay, so for those of us who are watching, talk to me about describing what an Ashkenazi Jew is and whether or not you are under this envelope of Ashkenazi if one parent is Sephardic.
Yeah. So when we say Ashkenazi Jews, we're generalizing to mean those Jews who come of Eastern European descent.
Okay.
And so we've followed Jews of Eastern European descent in terms of their genetic background and have identified that they are carriers of 3 different general mutations in that BRCA gene. That doesn't mean that Sephardi Jews who come from other areas historically are immune to breast cancer. They certainly are not. And in fact, a lot of recent research is beginning to focus on the Ashkenazi Jewish community and genetic connections there. So although we've identified this BRCA gene, and I think it's a wonderful first step for Jewish families, we still have a ways to go in understanding how breast cancer affects Sephardi Jews and also Jews that are intermarried, Jews that adopt children from other backgrounds. There's a diversity in our culture, and so it's important to keep our eye on the radar of the spectrum of Jews in our community.
You know, we're making awareness. I want to make sure that everybody understands that BRCA is spelled BRCA, which stands for
breast cancer. Simple as that, just an abbreviation of breast cancer.
So if people wanted to find more information after they've seen this interview, what do you recommend? What direction should they go and look for more?
Well, Sharsheret's website, www.sharsheret.org, is a wonderful source of information. There's actually a place on the site where you can click on I am at risk. You don't need to be diagnosed with breast cancer to benefit from the resources. And lots to learn on the website. Our genetic counselor at Sharsheret is available for anybody with questions about cancer risk. And our resource directory on the website can identify lots of other avenues to explore BRCA genes.
You know, I can imagine somebody watching this interview might ponder whether or not that they're at risk. It must be very nerve-wracking. What advice do you have for someone who's contemplating whether or not they should investigate further? What are the pros and cons? Like, what advice do you want to give to someone who's nervous when they watch this episode?
Yeah, well, you know, I think part of the problem originates in the fact that we've lost so much of our family history in the Jewish community during World War II. So when you sit down with a genetic counselor, one of the first questions that they ask is often difficult, which is, what is your family history? You know, we've lost so many family members that sometimes it's just physically difficult to trace. The first step is just starting the conversation, having the talk with family members. Mom, Dad, what cancer do we have in our family? And if you see a trend of significant breast cancer, ovarian cancer in younger people.
What's younger?
I would say women who are premenopausal being diagnosed with breast cancer, meaning women at a very early age being diagnosed with a cancer that is typically not associated with young women.
So 35 and less?
I would say women in their 40s and younger. If you see that in the family, if you see ovarian cancer and significant prostate cancer, sisters who've had cancer, that's the kind of family history we like to flesh out with a genetic counselor in what we call genetic counseling. It's just a session like the two of us, sitting down and talking about history and, you know, whether or not genetic testing is appropriate and what might come of it.
If you have only one member, is that alarming that had ovarian cancer? Is that something that makes you worthwhile to pursue further, or can one chalk that off and say happened?
It's not really a numbers game, it's more a circumstance game. So for example, and I shouldn't even say game, it's not a question of numbers, it's a question of circumstances. So for example, if your mom had breast cancer in her 70s, that's not as much of a red flag as if your mom died of breast cancer when she was 42. That's more of a red flag for genetics. And so rather than just write it off and say, well, this is a one-time episode in our family, it's important to bring those conversations to the table with a genetic counselor.
So tell me, why are you such an expert in the BRCA gene?
I didn't start off as an expert in BRCA. I wasn't actually even in the healthcare field. I'm actually trained as an attorney. I graduated from Columbia Law School and thought I would go on to make partner in a law firm and sort of do the typical things that law students think they'll end up doing. Unfortunately, I was diagnosed with breast cancer for the first time at the age of 28.
Sorry.
And so it's been a 10-year journey of learning for me about the issues that are unique to our community.
So first of all, it's shocking. I don't know that at 28 I went to get tested. What made you decide to go get tested for breast cancer?
I actually got tested after I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So the diagnosis came first, the testing came second. I was in the shower and changing into a bathing suit. I was thinking, 28, I'm going to get healthy and fit, and I noticed a sliver of a shadow in one of my breasts. And that sliver of a shadow turned out to be a lump, and that lump turned out to be a malignant tumor. So I was diagnosed at 28, and only then did I start to learn about some of the issues that affect Jewish families. And it was actually my stepmother, who had lost her own mother to breast cancer, who said, maybe you should consider genetic testing. And I said, I don't even know what you're talking about. And here I was, an educated young woman. I'd never even heard about the Jewish gene or any of the BRCA mutations. I did end up getting tested. I happened to have tested negative, but the implications of testing for me were enormous.
Oh, you tested negative.
I tested negative. I know. A lot of people are surprised to hear that, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers watching will be surprised to learn that.
I find it very commendable that even though you were tested negative and supposedly off the hook, you decided to pursue this much further, so much so that you've developed this organization. And I understand in the last 10 years, you've opened up 11 new national programs.
Correct.
That's outstanding.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about some of these programs, and can I participate?
You certainly can. Anyone can.
Rochelle, I'm going to stop you on that because we're going to go to break. We'll be right back.
On the other side, Shay continues her conversation about the Jewish connection to the BRCA gene mutation. Welcome back. The J Report, Shay Yuval continues her discussion with Rochelle Shoritz about the BRCA gene mutation.
Welcome back to the J Report. I'm Shay Yuval, and I'm here with Rochelle Shoritz of the Share organization, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about her work.
Share really started as a peer support network. Our goal was to connect young women who had been newly diagnosed with each other for support, advice, guidance, not medical referrals, but more the psychosocial support that a young person needs.
Like a patient advocacy type of support.
Advocacy, and also just connecting with someone who was pursuing a career and wanted to know what it was like to leave the firm for 2 weeks because she was having a bilateral mastectomy, or a young mom raising a 3- and 5-year-old coming home from surgery. Those kinds of connections. From a Jewish perspective, we were also connecting women around the Jewish gene issue.
Right.
We were connecting women around spirituality, fertility.
I can imagine, you're thinking 28, why did I get this? Why did God give this to me? I'm wondering if you questioned your spirituality momentarily or however it was.
Sometimes those spiritual questions come around the time of High Holy Days. You're getting ready to pray for a life of health and wellness in the new year, and the issues that surround cancer just come crashing down. So having a Jewish community of all affiliations is actually a wonderful component to support. There's the psychosocial, there might be the clinical, and then there's this group of women who just understand what you're going through.
Right. It's hard. You may be 28 going through something life-changing, detrimental, and your parents want to support you, but they don't necessarily understand. So you want to connect with someone who's in your age bracket, who's got either the same children, the same job problems or whatnot, and connect with someone who gets it.
Right. And you've just described our peer support network. We actually have a database where women can call in, identify exactly who they might want to speak with. I want to speak to another young mom who has 2 teenage daughters who had the kind of surgery that I'm about to have and the same kind of chemotherapy. And we can literally make that match with women all across the country.
And I'm sure the woman who's gone through it was appreciative of the woman who helped her go through it, so she's willing to give the support to the next person.
And that's the chain. Right? That's the Share. That's the Share. In Hebrew it means chain, and those are the connections that we're making. Interestingly, of the 11 programs, one of them that we launched is called Embrace for women living with metastatic breast cancer or advanced breast cancer. And with the development of that program, the chain has really come full circle, because I was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer 2 years ago. And so now I participate in one of the programs that we actually helped launch. And so the chain has literally come full circle.
Full circle.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I also know, and you brought in beautiful jerseys from some of the marathons that you've participated in, and I spoke to your staff, and I understand that you have team athletes.
We do. Team Sharsheret competing in races across the country.
I love competition. Tell me more.
Team Sharsheret is an amazing opportunity for us to raise awareness. We literally fly in athletes, and when I mean athletes, I don't necessarily mean people who are training for professional athletic endeavors. I mean people like you and me who love to keep
half of it and jog the other half?
People who like to keep in shape and maybe interested in a New Year's challenge. They come from all across the country to either race, to bike, run, swim. You know, basically we've got a whole plate of opportunities, from the marathon to the half marathon to the triathlon, and Team Sharsheret is just growing. Each athlete raises tremendous awareness. They're increasing our network, increasing our exposure to Jews and families across the country.
So increasing network, I'm gathering that you probably need funds to support some of these programs. So if somebody wants to donate to one of your organizations, how do they go about doing that?
Oh, easy, and thank you in advance. Right on our website, www.sharsheret.org, there's an easy donate button. You can donate in honor of someone who's battling breast cancer, in memory of someone who's unfortunately lost her battle, in support of one of our team members, in support of a particular program. B'nai Mitzvah, who are celebrating Bat or Bar Mitzvah celebrations, often partner with us. Lots of different opportunities to raise awareness and to raise critical funds.
And if they want to become an athlete, they can go to the same website?
Same website. Partner with us, or upcoming events. You'll see the marathon, the half marathon, the tri. They're all amazing competitions.
So in addition to the competition, I understand you also do symposiums. You were just recently in San Antonio. Tell me about that.
A lot of our mission revolves around the education of the broader community. And by the broader community, I mean not just the Jewish community, but healthcare professionals and the population at large about the ways that breast cancer impacts our Jewish community.
You know what? You brought up a good point. My fear as I'm talking to you is my healthcare provider going to think that I have, who may or may not be Jewish, that I'm asking for something unreasonable? Are they going to think I'm a little bit paranoid? How does one bridge the gap between your quest to get possibly tested and your healthcare provider? Because we all have to get referrals. We can't just go to anyone. So how do we bridge that gap?
It's as simple as starting a conversation with your doctor about your family history. You know, it's not about being Jewish. Plenty of women call Sharsheret from families that are not Jewish, but they carry that gene. They know that there is significant family history. And so they come to Sharsheret because they know we are a community of women who are at increased risk of that gene mutation. So starting a conversation can simply mean going to your doctor and saying, listen, I'd love to sit down and tell you a little bit about my family history. I'm really concerned that there might be a lot of cancer there, and perhaps it's something that requires genetic counseling. And that conversation is very comfortable to most healthcare professionals. Some of them are not as familiar that breast cancer gene can pass down through men, but almost all of them are aware that it's something that is endemic to the Jewish community and that Ashkenazi Jews are at greater risk.
But I also understand you offer genetic counseling prior to getting tested to help you determine if you should get tested, what your decisions are, to talk you through it, because I can imagine the outcome could really be impactful, particularly if you're not prepared.
That's exactly right. You know, a conversation with a genetic counselor is prep work. It's your basic research. You know, you speak with someone who is knowledgeable about the breast cancer genetic experience, who can help you understand what are the implications of testing positive. You know, what are the decisions you might be able to make for yourself? What are the implications on your family members if you test positive? What happens if you test negative? You know, what kind of follow-up screening do you still need? And what happens if you opt not to test? You know, what are your options if you decide that for whatever reason genetic testing is not for you? How can you still stay on top of your health? And so connecting with a genetic counselor or even a peer supporter at Sharsheret is a great way to learn more about the genetic testing experience without jumping in and getting tested right away.
Give me that number one more time if people want to call in Sharsheret.
Toll free, it's 866-474-2774, and almost everything we have is available online, on the web. We really try to make our programs convenient particularly for young women who are working, who are busy raising children or considering family, might be dating like I am and are in relationships. Those women tend to really need things available online, but with that same degree of warmth that we offer at the hotline.
Now, I have another question. Let's talk about the Orthodox community, or maybe the Chabad community, and this sort of thing might be taboo to talking about. Tell me your experiences in that realm.
Yeah, you know, those experiences date back to my own family history. My grandmother died of postmenopausal breast cancer, and I often remark that I don't remember her using the words breast or cancer in my presence. You know, flash forward 20 so years later, her granddaughter is now the spokesperson for Jewish breast cancer, and we've really come a long way. But in some of our Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox communities, talking about cancer is still taboo. We don't talk about breasts, we don't talk about cancer because we're worried that our children won't be marriageable, that there might be some taint on the family that makes them less worthy to be set up in some of the arranged marriages we see in those communities. So we at Sharsheret are working very creatively with the Hasidic and the ultra-Orthodox communities to bring Sharsheret materials in the way that feels comfortable to them. We've got materials, for example, that don't have any pictures because images of women's bodies are not permitted in the households. We'll host teleconferences or events where the topic is not necessarily breast cancer, but sort of more generically, you know, my spiritual journey through illness. And in whatever way we can make Sharsheret programming accessible to the Hasidic and ultra-Orthodox community, we're armed and aim to do it.
Well, you know, I take my hat off to you. Very admirable organization. I'm going to look up some of that team athletes and see if I can maybe participate. If you're going to be there.
I did the triathlon last year. It's awesome.
The triathlon.
I did the tri. Three of us at the organization relayed one slot. So I did the bike. One of our staff did the run, and one did the swim, and it was amazing.
And you don't have to be good. You just need to participate.
You have to be good at whatever it is you sign on to do. And we offer training and coaching. And
wow, that's a lot.
There's a real online community. There's training in some local areas, so it's an amazing opportunity. If you want to do it with Sharsheret. It's really fun.
Well, now that you gave me the jersey, I think I'm going to be obligated, and I look forward to it.
There you go.
So, Rochelle, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us.
On the other side, we talk to none other than Fran Drescher about her commitment to a cause. Stay close. Welcome back. Now let's face it, Fran Drescher has become one of America's favorite Jewish American women. From her days as the nasal-voiced nanny on the hit CBS series to her current role as a healthcare advocate and civil rights activist, Drescher's staying power is hard to deny.
This is a Pamela Barish dress, and I thought that, and this actually is vintage from what I wore in the movie Spinal Tap. So I thought, you know, something old, something new, and I just wanted to zhuzh it up for this occasion.
Zhuzh it up for what occasion? As the United States grapples with the question of same-sex marriage, this civil rights activist decided she wanted to take a firm stand.
I'm very excited. It's a wonderful family. Tom and Russell are just the sweetest men, and their little girl and little boy, Madison and Mason, are oh so dear. He's wearing a little tuxedo, she's wearing like a little pink dress, and it's such a happy occasion for them. I feel a big responsibility to make this auspicious occasion extremely special, and I think that it's a nice way to leverage my celebrity and bring a positive spin to marriage equality.
Now, whether you support same-sex marriage or not, it's hard to deny that Jewish American women have been at the forefront of our nation's civil rights struggles. From Jewish women marching for African American civil rights, to Bella Abzug and Betty Friedan leading the women's movement, and now Fran Drescher standing up in favor of marriage equality, Jewish women have been at the forefront of virtually every civil rights struggle in the United States. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the J Report. In some nations around the world, Orthodox Jews comprise a significant percentage of the overall Jewish community, not in America. So sit back and listen to how Orthodox Jews in America seem to have found the key to marital bliss. Let's face it, no matter how much you may love your spouse,
marriage is about stress. Marriage is about conflict.
and that stress, that conflict will surface in any marriage, even among devout, Orthodox Jewish couples.
Conflicts that we have in our marriages are pretty similar to the conflicts that other people have in their marriage.
Yet many Jewish Americans might be surprised by that statement. While surveys differ, the Orthodox Jewish community makes up about 10% of American Jewry. And for the other 90%, Orthodox Judaism can be as mysterious as another religion altogether. Well, let's shed some light on at least one aspect of Orthodox Jewish life: marriage. In a recent survey of Orthodox Jews,
75% of the respondents rated their marriages as excellent or very good, which was actually very, very interesting to us.
when the survey showed such results, the Orthodox Union decided to expand the pool to confirm these findings and to compare them to the overall population.
In our sample of Orthodox Jews, 72% of men and 74% of women rated their marriage as very good or better. By contrast, findings in the overall U.S. population are considerably lower. Only about 63% of men and only about 59.5% of women, of those in the general community, said they were very happy with their marriages.
Okay, so Orthodox marriages are happier, but like Dr. Pelkowitz said, with marriage comes stress. So do we find different stressors in secular marriages than we do in Orthodox marriages?
Research on the general secular community has identified certain areas where conflict is common: children, money, household tasks, time, sexual issues, in-laws, whether to have a or have another child.
And in Orthodox Jewish marriages,
The 5 areas most often identified as extremely or somewhat stressful were financial issues, lack of communication, problems with intimacy or sexuality, lack of relationship or time together, and conflicts with in-laws.
did you notice the distinctions? Children are not even mentioned as direct stressors in Orthodox marriages, even though average Orthodox Jewish families will have 3.5 children, while the average family in the United States will have 1.9 children. But is this increase in marital satisfaction among the most religious Jews unique when compared to devout communities in other faiths?
Our findings that religious persons are more content in their marriages than those in the general community are consistent with previous studies of religious groups. Many studies indicate that couples who participate regularly in religious activities report greater marital happiness and satisfaction and may be less likely to divorce compared to their less religious counterparts.
Maybe it's time to start going to synagogue more often. For the J Report, I'm Brad Pomerantz. Who knew? Okay, on the other side, we meet Ruth Dayan, the iconic Israeli woman who continues to be a force for change. We'll be right back. It's the J Report. At the 18th Maccabiah Games in Israel, I had the honor to interview the longtime wife of Israeli military leader and politician Moshe Dayan. Her name, Ruth Dayan. Now listen to how this woman has been fighting for social justice for decades. You're watching Jewish Life Television. I'm Brad Pomerantz. Thank you so much for joining us. We are broadcasting from Ramat Gan, Israel, right outside of Tel Aviv, and it is really my supreme pleasure to introduce you to one of our heroes, a real pioneer in the state of Israel. You know her as Ruth Dayan. She's so much more than what I'm going to tell you. She happened to have been the former wife of Moshe Dayan, Moshe, of course, was a military hero, the defense minister of the state of Israel. But Ruth, in her own right, has been a real legend, and I am so pleased that you took the trip to speak with us on Jewish Life Television. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Now, what makes Ruth amazing in so many ways is that she has really lived the Israeli experience from start to finish. And in 1932, Ruth Dayan was in the first Maccabiah Games. It really is remarkable that you were in those games. Talk to me about how you became a Maccabean in 1932.
I myself, when I look back, I don't understand why I was a Maccabean. First of all, I was in it was called the Rechavia Gymnasia, the high school in Jerusalem, and I belonged to youth movement, the socialist youth movement, and we didn't have to belong to the Maccabi because that school sent to the first Maccabiah a whole group of children from all ages, according to the picture. I got this picture for my 90th birthday.
I love it.
One of the other from my school, a schoolmate, the same age, looks very well, still drives. He was in the Air Force. And for my birthday, he brought me the picture. That's 2 years ago. He brought me this picture in a silver frame.
Now, I understand, though, you didn't want to participate in the games.
I thought that I shouldn't say it because
It's okay.
Because
it's okay. Why didn't you want to participate?
Because we didn't know much about the Maccabi. Not that we were, I don't even know about the Poel. But we had a teacher, our sports teacher was very, very strong. Aluf, his name was Aluf, and Yeshua Aluf, he Hebraized his name, I think. And he made me go into training before. And I decided I'm not going. It's something that belongs to the Maccabi. I'm not going. And we did running.
Right.
We were supposed to run. And I trod on purpose on the white. That's all what I remember. And he knew that it was on purpose. And he said, "No, I will definitely go to the Maccabi."
Now, I see on the picture that we're showing you have a bandage on your
Yes,
leg.
because
What was that?
No, because I said that when I fell, and then
Got it. It was on purpose.
On purpose.
Okay.
And then it didn't help me. And we really went in the name, according to the picture, I can see, in the name of the gymnasium of this, because in those days sports was very important. I was very good at basketball. I remember we had a lot of things, and I remember this teacher telling my mother that Ruth must learn to walk straight and not run, and like a boy. I always wanted to be a boy then. And
I have two daughters. I want to support women and girls.
And to this day, I still run.
Really?
Even my children always say, "Mother, go slowly now."
You run.
I run. Sometimes I fall, but I still run.
And apparently it was a good thing you were in the Maccabiah Games because you won you took first place in one event and second place in another event.
Yes.
What did you take first place in?
The first was
The relays.
The relays. And we did it very nicely, and then I won a medal for discus.
Right, you took second place in the discus.
By the way, I want to ask you, do you still have a thing like a disc?
You know, the disc, it's not in the games anymore. I know that. I'm not sure if it's in the Olympic Games, but I know it's not part of the Maccabiah Games, unfortunately.
I don't even think I know what to do with the disc today.
But it's nice.
Anyway, it was nice to be, and the whole thing was a great occasion because you must understand, from Jerusalem, we were Jerusalemites. To come to Tel Aviv, it took 2.5 hours by train. And it was a train, the Hajjaz train, a big train, Turkish in Turkestan.
Of course.
And I remember that I wanted to show off, and I was jumping up and down, and I sat in where the racks, where the luggage.
Always a rebel.
And then we came, and we called to many days, for many years, we called it the particular grounds, the Maccabi grounds.
Right.
It was always, I even heard Jabotinsky give a speech. I was even...
And who is that?
10 years, but, who started the revisionist.
Got it.
A great man and a great writer. And I'm sorry to say we don't have people like that in any of the parties like the old days. And my grandfather took me once to the Maccabi grounds. I always knew there was the Maccabi grounds, and it's still there.
Talk to us about what you've seen with the Maccabi movement since 1932. I know you've remained involved in some way.
No, well, you see, of course, because I like...
You like sports?
No, I like football.
Okay.
Do you call it football?
American soccer. Soccer.
We don't call it soccer. We call it football.
Of course.
And I like, and because I was one of my very close friends owned the Maccabi. They sold it now, I'm sorry to say, but I went with her as like a VIP. And I love the games. And
it's wonderful.
I mean, I was not only that. Of course, all the time I belonged to the Maccabi, part of the Maccabi.
More with Ruth Dayan on the other side. We continue our conversation with a true pioneer of change, Ruth Dayan. I want to ask you briefly about Moshe, because he was your husband for many, many years.
37.
You did get divorced and wrote a wonderful book about him called Did I Dream? It came out in 1973 about his, shenanigans, whatever we'll call it. But talk to me about the man, the marriage.
No, but you see, it's being at my age, when I look back, it's all, there's a human aspect to it, that your life goes in two parallel, that Ben-Gurion told me, two parallel lines,
right.
And they don't meet. But so I was always working all my life. I left a good home in Jerusalem to milk cows in Halal at 4 o'clock in the morning, and married Moshe. If it wasn't for the building of the state or the wars that happened and all what happened, we would have still been on our own.
Interesting.
Farm. Because in 1945, my parents bought us a farm for ourselves. Before we were working on his farm. But he was always, either he was in prison for 2 years and then he lost his eye, it took a year to heal. And then my parents and we really wanted to settle down on our own farm. And it was wonderful. From 45, our youngest son Hassi was born on that farm, and Yair was born on the parents' farm, my eldest daughter, who's 70. So it was the nicest time of our lives that we had 3 years till the 48 when we had to leave it. And in those days the farms were getting bigger and modernized, not like when I came. We had no electricity, no running water, nothing like that.
Now, what people know you for today is not the fact that you happen to have been married to Moshe Dayan.
Yeah.
It's what you've done for the people of Israel, and not just the Jews of Israel. It's the Bedouins. It's the Israeli Arabs. Talk to me about that.
No, I still think today, maybe because I grew up in a home in Jerusalem where it was a mixed, and for years we lived in Arab houses with Arabs in the same house. And now every day I hear on television that we're buying a house here and throwing out an Arab here and all that. And I grew up with my parents knew very well Arabic. All those from that generation, Moshe, Sharet, and Tovaz, all our leaders all knew Arabic and knew it well, and had friends, lawyers, and headmasters of schools. My mother was a teacher in an Arab kindergarten, and she spoke Arabic. And the first playground in Jerusalem, in the old city, was run by my mother, and it was given to Hadassah by a woman called Bertha Guggenheimer. And her cause was that it should be for Jews and Arabs. And Jews and Arab children were playing together for many years. My mother was in charge. There was riots in 29, very bad. It was Hebron fed. It closed the playground for 2 weeks. Then it opened and everything started again. And that always I keep in my mind.
It stuck with
that
you.
one can work towards peace, but I don't see it round the corner. But I think every day of my life I'm involved. I'm now going to the West Bank to help them with their embroidery and to try and when you go, what does a man want? He wants to work and give breakfast to his children, and to have education, through education and economy.
So how does it make you feel to be assisting Palestinians, Israeli Arabs, Bedouins in your heart?
No, but I do the same. I did it for in our country where that doesn't matter. I don't. Not that I think in this time and age when there shouldn't be any borders, because people really travel all over the world. Look at America. You have probably more Israelis there almost.
That's what they say.
I'm not joking. And for me, because I was brought up that way, and my father was, London School of Economics was the cradle of socialism when he was there. Lasker and Bertrand Russell and all of that, and H.G. Wells. Nobody knows who H.G. Wells is when I say today. Others don't know here. When I said that the daughter-in-law of H.G. Wells was in my father's class.
Really?
And my daughter, Yael, when she was 16, she finished here high school, and my parents got in touch with his daughter-in-law, and she stayed with the
that's wonderful.
So I was brought up, it wasn't that all of a sudden I had an organization.
Right, I understand.
But I belong to many organizations that believe in and doing it through economy. Through economy you can do a lot. You can build up the whole Middle East with good economy.
I am so glad you came in. I am so glad you came in. It really has been my honor and pleasure. And I thank you so much for what you're doing for the Maccabean movement, for the people of Israel, and really for the people of the Middle East and the entire world.
I hope Maccabi wins the soccer.
We'll see. We'll see. Rutayan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
From Ramat Gan, Israel, I'm Brad Pomerantz. Thank you for watching Jewish Life Television. What a treat that was. Okay, that's all for this edition of the J Report. Don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter at Brad Pomerantz. You can follow JLTV on Twitter at Jewish Life TV. And of course, JLTV is always online at www.jltv.tv. For the entire J Report team, I'm Brad Pomerantz. Thanks for watching.